Welcome to Men Talk Ubuntu podcast. Our guest this episode is an inspiring international speaker, an author who spent years nurturing others as a nurse and now nurtures them through grief recovery. Her sensational book titled Marriage, Why Bother? Goes further than the negativity and discouragement around marriage we often hear, instead empowering those willing and honest enough to make changes to their attitude and start from within themselves to then make life better for their partners and the world at large. We are excited to hear some of the captivating accounts from her life and the invaluable advice that she'll dispense. Dorothy, it's a pleasure to have you here. Please tell us about your story and journey.
Thank you very much, Shamanda. And I'm delighted to be here on this program because I am always delighted to be where you can reach out to people and maybe they may be able to get something from what you know. As you have already said, my name is Dorothy Malanda. I was born, brought up and educated in Kenya, trained as a nurse and a midwife in Kenya before I proceeded to the UK, where I have been for the last 18 years. I am passionate about transforming lives through the book, through songs, through my work, and any space I get, I feel like saying something might give value. And that's who I am, passionate about helping others to see further than they think they can go.
Fantastic. I mean, I can attest to that because we met through Toastmasters and just incredible speaker. And like I say, sharing a lot of her own experiences. Like, I was always captivated by some of the stories you told, Dorothy. And it didn't surprise me. Well, it did, but it didn't surprise me that you'd written a book. And yeah, it's just fabulous. So based off of that, today, what we're going to talk about is grief and glory, because I believe that's what you do really well at the moment, or that's what you share with the world. The way of processing and navigating our way through grief and attaining glory within ourselves and our lives, essentially, which grief can sometimes hold us back from when we don't know quite how to process it, which is why I think the work you're doing is so important. But before we get into your work and before we get into more of your history, I'd love to hear, say on a scale of 1 to 10, where you are mentally. Say 1 being low and 10 being high.
10.
Yeah, may I ask why?
I feel I'm in charge of myself. I can manage my little or my workload, and I can see the day being bright and having prospects for each and every one of us. So my joy of being a 10 is the fact that given how I spend this day, there is a possibility I'll achieve more.
I love that. Brilliant. I think we should all feel like that, shouldn't we? Like just the fact that we've got options and we woke up this morning, it's enough to get us to a 10. Get it. Now, since we know you're up at a 10, I hope to keep it there for the whole episode, right?
I hope so.
Well, at least by the end. And I think what we discuss is probably going to help a lot of people know how to aspire towards a 10 and maintain that. So let's try and find out a bit more about you now. And may I ask, what's your mental health story? So when did mental health sort of become part of your life or awareness?
For me, mental health I was aware of it at the age of 10. That's when my father had a mental health problem. And then I think 3 or 4 years later, my brother also had a mental health problem. So I had those throughout my childhood. You had that stigma of being associated with coming from a family with mental health. But I always tell people with the joy that we went to mental health institutions and we got help. It's only when my dad or my brother wouldn't take their medication as expected that it got out of order. And then we had problems of erratic behavior. But when they followed the steps, it was fine. The hurdles we had are still sadly the same hurdles which were there. The struggle you have to go to get to access that institution, the stigma of the people who believe you are cursed, you have done something wrong, you should be ostracized from the community, and all kinds. And I'm surprised it's still holding even up to now. So that was my first journey with mental health and the impact it's had on us economically, socially, physically, mentally, name it. Like the theme of the mental health that says, I've been there. Yes, I've been there.
Oof, that's heavy. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, you've definitely been there, and I think it's also, I think you're definitely the first guest we've had who has experience of engaging with mental health providers or facilities or institutions, if you will, in an African context. Because even like, say, I'm from Zambia, and I heard about one of the sort of mental health hospitals, but I never went there. And the only time anyone ever went there was if they'd gone to like the extremes, you know, and the perception is they basically lost their mind type thing. So the perception was not great. I'm not too sure what it's like back home now. Um, I'm hoping there's changes. Now, you've said that they were quite helpful and they actually provided medication and sort of good information, if you will. The issues only were coming if that guidance wasn't followed. I mean, I know you were 10, so it might be unfair to ask what was your perception before all of that came in, or if you had any awareness, or if it's because obviously we're so close to home that when it came about, that's when you first understood, and then you started to see these differences with the people around you and how they started to speak or treat you and your family, perhaps.
I say, I think even when it came, we didn't really know what it meant. So we sort of evolved with it. You just realize life is not as it was before this illness came on. And then, of course, with the physical destruction of destroying other people's things and things like that, you see it. And then now, when you are told this is a mental health illness, but the society says no, it's just they've lost their mind, they've done something, they're being punished by God or something like that. And so the story just, you learn to keep to yourself.
Wow. And did that affect perhaps how you communicated with friends or made friends? Or I was going to ask, how did that shape you moving forward or change you in any way, you know, with how you interacted with others?
I think it initially affected us badly because since if you go to friends, all they're telling you, you come from these families, your dad is mentally ill, your brother is mentally ill, and that's what they'll be going on about. You learn to avoid them. You learn to keep quiet because it's like if you speak, then you are giving them something to start picking on you. So as a child, then you learn to pick your friends carefully and be silent, sort of, so that it's like you don't exist. And that in itself, I think, impacted me in life because throughout my school, I never put my hand up to answer anything, although I knew the answers. I never volunteered to do anything. And even when I still performed well, they would still talk about it in a very demeaning way.
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for me to even imagine going through that. I think around, for me, it was around that age, is when I was about 10, 9 or 10, is when I lost my mom. And it's not something that people will speak about really, say, even if you're in school or when you're walking around. So it's almost the exact opposite, where it seems like, or it sounds like for you, people were, making it an issue. I'm curious if, like, you've made the observation that that maybe even silenced you a bit more in life in general. Yeah, I was just going to ask if, based on what you said about keeping quiet and not wanting to be seen in case people bring this up, whether there was a turning point, if you will, where you began to own this side of you and express that, your experiences have sort of shaped who you are, or whether it kept you, or you've kept that kind of personality or approach.
I think before I reached that idea of changing me, it first went worse because actually my brother was later killed, murdered when he had some of the episodes. So that made me even more angry towards the community. And the fact that he was screaming and saying, I'm so and so, I'm going from here to there, and they just took away his life. And then the fact that our traditions added in, if you are killed or if you murder yourself, if you commit suicide in my community, you are buried unceremoniously. There is no mourning, there is no nothing. It's like my brother was buried at night. So the fact that there is no singing, there is no, even when people are in your home, they are complete silence. So that even brought more darkness, especially my brother having been like the light in our home. And then your only light is blown off, and then people expect you to just take it like that. So I felt angry that really grieving is not about the dead, it's about the living coming to terms with your loss. So that's where I really got off, and I thought I wasn't happy with how our life was. I was going to seek to see how we can transform our lives. And that is how I got deeper into my Christian faith. And out of that, I wrote that book, Marriage, Why Bother? It's the transitioning period where I learned things. And later on in life is when I've gathered the courage to break that silence and tell people, this is who I am. This is what has happened to us. And since I started doing that, many people came up and said, oh my goodness, this has happened to us and we've had this weight. We can't tell anybody. So I've seen it liberating many other people as I share the story.
You describe a very difficult situation from what I can hear. Oof. It's hard. It's hard to know what to say. Like, wow, I'm incredibly sad, and I can only say I feel for you and your family and what you must have been going through and experiencing at that point. Uh, glad you managed to come through the other side of it. Find some sort of resolve, if you will, to keep powering through with it, and take the ownership, like you say. So I feel like we've definitely jumped a bit as well, because I don't know if you wrote Marriage, Why Bother before getting married, but I suspect
After
you didn't.
marriage.
Yeah, because I saw the children's names in there, so I'm like, ooh. So I guess before perhaps I ask you about how you worked through overcoming that grief and I'm imagining unimaginable sadness, and perhaps where we can share some of these steps other people can take, whether they're young or old, and when they're faced with a loss or all this sort of adversity from the outside world. Before we get to that, I wanted to, I suppose, ask, with knowing what you know now, if there's advice you would give to your younger self. Don't know at which point or what advice it would be, or whether it would be about grief or relationships, but just seeing how much you've evolved as a person and experienced, is there some advice you perhaps think you would have given or liked to have heard as your younger self?
I think I wouldn't have given myself any other different advice because of the era we grew in, where most sort of children are there to be heard and to be seen and not to be heard. So even when you tell people what you're going through, they tell you, oh, just persevere, or you don't worry about it. So really, the awareness of the mental health was not as much as it is, because I'm talking about 45 years ago. So it was not as much as it is today. Although even much as it is, I still see it even in this country and back home. We still have that stigma affecting the people with mental health or their families.
And did this play a role in your chosen career path at the time?
I think what brought a role in my career path, mostly I would say because my mother was caring, she was counseling, ladies came to her for different issues here and there, and she always talked about confidentiality. So I sort of picked that from her. And so along the way, people were able to entrust me with their confidential information. And so that became compatible with my nursing career. And since we had several deaths in our family, we lost quite many members. I literally took it upon myself to start searching for information because I felt people who were grieving were not supported well. So I went in search of information, and I used to avail myself and support them how I knew better in that time. So with that, I've been in the nursing career where more of my time I actually devoted on the emotional well-being of the people. So besides the physical one, I always looked into that as well. And therefore, that sort of now gave me my voice of realizing that it's so many people who are here and we're just quiet. And so as you start talking about it, then you feel somebody else has heard and the message is spreading. Coming to grief recovery, I'll step back. When I wrote my book, I didn't prepare because I still had this usual me. So when I was asked to tell people what my book was about, I said no and sat down.
Well, okay. You weren't saying no to keep it a secret. You were saying no because maybe you hadn't processed it yet, or
Because of that old
yeah.
me, because
Oh, the
my
old you
defense
who never
mechanism
raised your
was
hand.
don't talk, just don't be seen. So that is what kept me now.
Wow.
But then I had to find a way out, and that's how I got into Toastmasters to build my confidence and public speaking skills, and met Shamanda there.
Wow. Okay, that gives me a lot more context for what was going on.
Yeah, so
See, I met you. I thought, oh, incredible speaker. So all of this is, really new information for me in a way, Wow. Okay, so you were being proactive and trying to change. So you'd written the book as your own way of getting what was inside out. Um, and then you were now trying to make sure you can express it to actually share. Because I'm starting to remember a bit now. Yeah, because you had like this amazing book and you wanted to gift it to the world, but you couldn't tell people about it.
yeah.
Ah, yeah, okay. This is a few years ago, okay? So wow, okay. It's all piecing together for me as well now, you see. Okay, that's wow. Had you undergone like counseling or therapy or any kind of support in that way that led you perhaps to maybe I don't even know if we should first go back a step as well and to ask about how the marriage came through and how all those things worked out uh, before we get to the book because as far we left you in sort of school. Like we're tracing back. Not that this is supposed to be linear or anything, but so I'm just
I,
aware
I,
that there's a jump.
I think, I was trying to connect for you
Yes.
because in the process of finding hope and help for ourselves, that's how I got into the Crisco Church in Kenya. So that book is a product of the Crisco Church teachings that we received. And because of those teachings, whenever I spoke to people, they always told me issues to do with their marriages, even if when they're older than me. And I'm thinking, look at your age. So I combined all the common things they spoke about and put it into that book. So that was how the book came upon being written. And then in that process now is where I was in my Toastmasters journey. I was researching on the grief because it was a topic I was passionate about. And I got to grief recovery method, which I realized it addressed what I did in an organized manner. And it just, when I went for the course, I actually thought I was going for the course to teach others. It's only when I arrived there, I realized I'd not dealt with my own grief. So that is where things were starting now, where I started processing my grief, even some way as 20 years before.
No, that might be too private. I was going to ask which was the hardest one to go through, or the most difficult one, perhaps, when you started processing. Or
my brothers,
yeah,
the one who had been murdered.
I'm just thinking in case there are other people who face some, similar tragedies or other tragedies for themselves. And, it's no substitute for them seeking their own help and going on their own journey of, recovering through grief. What was most supportive for you or helpful for you when confronting this tragedy?
Okay. What I would say, when you have tragedies, especially somebody's life is taken away, they've died in an accident, or, things that maybe somebody has died of, anything that is stigmatized, let me put it that way, you tend to have that anger towards the community, towards people, towards justice system. So you don't process your grief, you spend your time on those people. You are seeking for justice. So what you realize is no matter what you do, that grief will remain unresolved until you actually face it. So I would tell people, like me, what was liberating was the fact that I had held so much anger against my community and all the rules. But there was one question that asked us, especially if you have people who have died or things that have happened in unexpected, that if this brother of yours had died a different death, would I love him less or more? And I realized actually the process is not the issue. The issue is my relationship with my brother. That was what I was grieving about. And that is when I got back to start actually grieving the dreams, the hopes, the expectations we had built together, and the things. So I removed the focus from the outside and came back inside. And that is when I got liberated. In grief recovery, we say we grieve every loss individually 100%. So that is the first time I now literally grieved him using the steps that we follow. So I would tell the people that no matter what you do, always remember it is from within. That grief goes inside you. So it's you getting it out so that you can be able to move in spite of the loss, that you can be able to carry on living your life.
Thank you for sharing that with the people. I think that's just beautiful advice. I wanted to ask because I was also actually having a conversation with a friend that prompted me to think about this ahead of our conversation. When it comes to grief, I think there can be a sort of before, during, or after the loss, depending on what the person is going through. What this friend shared was a relative is, facing critical health issues, and that relative themselves is not coping too well with that. and I suppose being faced with their mortality and having to make final decisions, which they're not necessarily doing, perhaps because they're grieving their own loss of control, loss of life, impending loss of life. And now there's the people who are around them who are anticipating the loss, and then there will be the loss, and then there will be after the loss, you know. I guess the question that follows on from that is, how can we better, or how can we get better at grieving? Is this something where we can just speak more openly, not just about, you know, tragedies, but is this something to do with, say, like you mentioned, the emotional well-being and, you know, emotional health? Do we try and build that up so that when we're faced with a loss or a, you know, critical illness or drastic changes, that we're okay? I don't know if from your experience there's something some people can do that can help prepare them, if you will, for grief, even if indirectly.
As you have rightfully said, grief is the normal natural response to any loss of any kind. So it's not just about death. It could be loss of health, it could be loss of wealth, it could be loss of just the fact that your hopes, dreams, and expectations have not come true, or loss of trust and faith in people. It could be even just location, you moving from Manchester, going to London. That could also affect. And also, you need to acknowledge that also even positive things can also bring a sense of grief. Even success, you are promoted and you're moving on, but there'll be that sense of grief. You are losing these people you had made connections with, all the attachments you had made, you are leaving them. So you get that sense of feeling like you are grieving. Or like me, I would say my children should be blessed and grow up and find their wings. When they go, now I start feeling lonely in the house. I start grieving.
There's no mess. There's no. Guess we get used to it, right? It's hilarious. I wonder if they grieve as well, or if they're like, "Woo, I'm free." No, but I think a lot of the times, at least even for me, when the comfort of home is gone,
Yeah.
as much as you enjoy your independence and freedom, and you now take ownership of your life, you do miss a part of yourself, because for years that's been who you are. You know the conversations, you know the company who will be there, and you know some of the interactions are also you're used to it, you know what it is. And
Mm.
I think you mentioned there's this, like, just like when you get a promotion, the job calls for different routines, different ways of perhaps carrying yourself. And yeah, we often don't grieve, whether it's for positive or negative changes, whatever you perceive them as. We don't think I need to grieve my previous iteration, you know, my previous version of who I was. We tend to be pretty focused on now and what comes later. So that was a very, very great point. Again, I think you've made for the people listening. What I do want to ask is to do with loneliness, because I feel like, in my opinion, grief is something that we tend to want to do on our own and sort of tuck away and process on our own, which can be quite a lonely feeling. Or perhaps we might feel as though, because it's so personal, that other people won't understand. Is there, and maybe it's a bit of both, is there merit in just holding on to some of it for ourselves, and because we have to process it, because no one else can really truly understand what we're going through, or our feeling of loss for whatever this is? Because, like, say someone else might look at you and go, "Oh, you've got a promotion, you must be over the moon," and then you go, "Well, I kind of don't like all my new colleagues," or "I'm not as happy for some reason. Like, I don't know, life has changed." and they might not get it in a simple way of putting it. But it's, yeah, basically, I just wanted to ask about this idea of feeling isolated during grief, because I think most people tend to. So even if you have a loss, I think most people tend to say it the first time, and then they'll to other people post, say, funeral or anything else, they'll tend to carry it themselves. It's not something they would bring up. Is it okay? Forget that question because it's gone on too long.
I'll still answer it.
Okay, Fab. I was gonna say, should we
Okay.
be asking people more? Is it more just for all of us? Like, just ask the question and then see what the person says.
Okay. So there are two things here that you are asking within your long story. It comes down to two things: what we, the supporters, are doing and what we individually as the grievers are doing. So from the grief recovery point of view, both we, the grievers, and the supporters, we are lacking in the means of how to deal with the grief effectively, because we have been socialized in a way that grief is something that we never were free to talk about. Whether it's death of somebody, you kept it quiet, or as you said, for a little time and then it goes, so it's kept quiet. Or if you raise it up, people don't know what to do with you, so they just get away to change the subject. So the issue is not that they're changing the subject. The issue is they don't know how to deal with you, which they didn't, you also don't know how to do it. So what we are doing as grief recovery, we are training people. We are saying that grief has been mishandled for many years. And these people gave us what they also knew how to do. And so we inherited it. But now we are going to look into it. Is it working? For example, in grief recovery, we talk about 6 myths. The first myth is when we tell people, don't feel bad, it's okay, don't cry. The second one, we say, grieve alone by saying it or by actions. When I see Shamanda is calling me, I think, oh, he's going to tell me about that. I leave the phone, or I say I'm not available. Or if we've been going around walking, doing things together, but something has happened now, somebody doesn't know how to approach you. So in that process, you learn to think, now I'll just process it myself. I don't want to burden people. So you keep yourself aside. But then on the other side, the people, like here, they would say, Shamanda, if you need help, just text me and I drop a card for you. Or give me a ring. And then that's it. So you won't hear of me. So that explains why some people lose their confidence, because they now disconnect with their friends and family. So it takes more energy for them to rebuild, to reach where they are going. And some people just disappear from there. Now they are no longer going out. They are no longer doing this. The confidence keeps being knocked. Then we have the other myth of replace the loss. Shamanda, don't worry about that broken relationship. You'll get another girlfriend.
I've heard that before.
There's plenty of fish in the sea. And then we've got the one where people tell you it will take time. Time heals all wounds. It surely doesn't. It, as I said, like in my case, I was grieving now what I would have grieved 20 years ago, but it was still hurting me all along. So time alone, without you acting on positively towards your recovery, will not heal you. And
And
then when you look at that, you think, what am I supposed to do? So you start looking for your other help the way you've been taught. So some people may pray away the problems, but they won't go. You still have to act. You can't ignore or you can't hide it. Grieving, the only issue of how to deal with it is to actually grieve in a systematic way, address the loss you have had. You have to go through the pain to be better, because you can never hide from it. You can't go underneath or around, or you just have to go through it and face it that way. And then we have the common one, keep busy like Shamanda.
I can't lie, guilty as charged. I can't lie. That, that's definitely my tendency. It's like
Yes.
even if I lose something or a big change happens, I'll just get busy with the next thing. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have like Black men, Black African men. You're the family leaders. Then you feel, I've got to be strong for my family, for my wife, for my children. So be strong for others is the other myth that people tell you. So the wife is hiding the grief from the husband from the child from the. So that family could actually be together and they all cry and they all grieve and they'll be come out healthily. That now each is spending extra energy to hide from the other. So you get it doesn't really help. So those are the myths. But in between that, when we do our sessions, we come up with people have got their own, which they've also developed. So maybe you should think, which one have you been using?
Yeah, I'll definitely be dedicating more time. When we had our introduction, a brief conversation before we planned this, I thought I'd started processing and thinking through some things. I see now I have to get the shovel out and dig deeper. And I know you sort of mentioned that this is a system that's used or a framework that's used. And I know this is something you and some others are providing people, especially in our communities. And I'm very eager also for you to share how you've done some of this in Kenya, and to begin with, just how can people find what your work is up to, like this particular work with the grief recovery? How could people seek it out if they're thinking this is something that might be helpful for me or maybe even my family because we've just been through something?
We've got a lot of information on grief recovery USA. Our UK has been dissolved into the USA. So the Grief Institute is in US. So if you go on Grief Recovery USA, you'll get all the details about grief, because this is a program that has been going for over 35 years, and it has been proven to be effective, and it's been reviewed and updated. So you'll get there all information. And then there is a place, it also allows you, it also informs you that we do different ways. We take care of people on one-to-one, in person or online. Then you also have group sessions. And also because they realize that some people with the feedbacks, like the people who had pets lost, they felt when they were in the group with others who are talking of maybe my husband has died, my son has died, and you're talking about a pet. So it seemed like the others looked like that was minor, but loss is a loss, 100% to the person, whatever it is. Whether it's a pregnancy, it's 100%. It doesn't mean that your son who was in the university is greater than that pregnancy. It's just 100% to the affected person. So we also have programs, even for the people who have pet losses, a program for them. And then we have the program for grieving children also. And then you've got a program for grieving adults. Children, their language is modified from the adult language. So that's why we have one for grieving children. But for grieving children, we empower the adults who deal with the children, like the parents, youth workers, Sunday school teachers, school teachers, those who spend time with the children, because they observe them over time and they can see what their actions are and how they are on day-to-day basis. So all those categories show that grief affects you. So even people come to us because their cat is sick and it's almost to die. They start seeking help. So it's people being proactive.
Yeah, I think probably in the past I might have been guilty of perceiving the death of an animal or anything like that, or anything other than a close relative, as you shouldn't be comparing these things. But I've come to appreciate that as long as that person had this connection or attachment, it doesn't matter. The feeling is the same,
Mm,
the experience is the same. It's just like when they say if a child is scared and they're saying to you there's a monster under the bed, it doesn't matter that that there isn't one. It matters that they genuinely believe that there is one. So for them, the fear is absolutely real. They're not trying to make it up. And it's just that's how they're experiencing the world. And I think grief can be like that.
to add on
Mm.
that website also, they ask you if you're looking for a grief recovery professional, you just put your postcode and it gives you the people near your area. And then it gives you people who work online. So if you're going to work online, it doesn't matter whether you get somebody from USA, India, Kenya, or wherever. But if you are looking for somebody in person, then that postcode guides you who can you be able to reach within reasonable distance.
Fantastic. So Grief Recovery USA is the place to check out. And you've got so many options. You've got the information that's already there. If you're trying to engage with someone, you've got the options of online. And if you want in person, you've also got that option as well. I mean, this is just great. Like, this is the stuff that we wouldn't necessarily think perhaps is there, or we might create barriers in our mind and say, oh, there'll probably be a long waiting list, or there's probably nothing there for me specifically, or how do I know which one to go to? So thank you so much for sharing that with people, that this is what we need, really, in my opinion. And I think when you described that idea of you've got this family, for example, of a man, woman, and a child, and all of them are grieving in the same house, but each of them are keeping it secret. So it's like everyone's grieving in their own room. Just what that does to people, and it resonates back to your point of keeping it inside, keeping it quiet, because that each of them is going to be saying good morning to each other and are you all right? Are you okay? And you're essentially almost lying to the other people there, not in a malicious way, but you're trying to protect them and maybe make them not feel bad or anything like that and help them move forward. But it just shows there are alternative ways to doing this, and I think it's it's welcome, and perhaps overdue for us. So with that said, I mean, so we've covered a lot with grief and what to do, and we could definitely go in much more. There's a lot more, but we have our own restrictions with time. So what I want to ask you about is, I want to say the glory, because like I said, we're talking about grief and glory, and I think often there is a greatness within everyone, and sometimes we don't see it for various reasons, and it's just a greatness with life. Whereas grief can weigh us down, glory shows us how high up we can rise. So, what I would like to ask, in fact, well, okay. So, what suggestions would you have for people trying to raise themselves up, whether they're grieving a loss or whether they're just trying to get better? Because in my opinion, when I hear your story and about how your life journey has been, you're someone who has worked hard to glorify themselves and to raise the other people around them, which you continue to do with your book and with the current work and just with the people you're involved with. Even with me, with every conversation that you have, you sort of see the greatness in people and you're trying to help them make that shine and bring it out. But you've done so with yourself. You've gone from someone who was keeping quiet and holding their ideas in to sharing them out with the world. And I think a lot of people lack perhaps the courage, the confidence to do that. What's some of the advice you might have? How can someone be more like Dorothy?
I think success is not one way, so to say. For the first thing, especially maybe if I just conclude on the grief side, what we need to learn is the fact that grieving is a communal thing. So there are people who will be associated with you. So as a griever, you have to allow other people to come and help you when they offer help, because sometimes we keep them away from coming to help. We also have to realize that there are times we'll feel good and feel bad. It is part of the process, because when you are grieved from whatever cause, you'll have that time where you have the roller coaster of emotions. You think, oh, I've got it behind me, and then the next day you're down. Some people will overeat, some people will not eat well. Some people will sleep, some people will not sleep well. Others will oversleep. Others become more forgetful. And why they become more forgetful is because their focus is on the primarily on their loss. So because everything else becomes secondary, now they're not able to really know what is happening around them. And as the public, you and me, we need to look out for people who are going through hard times, whether it's divorce, separation, whatever it is. Know that these are some of the things that are happening in their world, and be able to help in a way that is possible, physically and also emotionally, just listening to them to say what they're going through. We don't have to do anything. We don't have to answer them. Even when they say, I don't believe it, my mother died, and you're saying, Dorothy, you are there when she was being buried. That's not the issue. The issue is they're just fighting in their mind. Allow them to get it out. Just listen, and then in the end, ask, can I do anything to help you out? Maybe run an errand for them, do something that would make a difference than if you are not there. And then also when people are talking, remember confidentiality, because there's no point of you coming there and taking what this person is saying somewhere else, because when they're talking, they're not actually in their own mind. Even when they hear themselves, or if you reflect back, you start thinking, wow, what did I just do? Or what was that? But then this person has taken that information wherever. So you've not been helpful. We just need to listen. In grief recovery, we say we listen to people without judgment, without criticizing. Just be a heart with ears. And that makes a difference.
Thank you. Just be a heart with ears. I want to let that sink in. Wow. Thank you. Yeah, that was perfect. That's the only way I can say it. Yeah. That was so perfect. Even the communal side, it evoked thoughts of for me, thankfully I've not lost too much family or close family, but I have lost some very dear friends, who are like family. And one of the factors, this communal aspect you mentioned, is everyone who remains, because I'm sort of grieving my friend who's not, I can't sort of hang out with anymore. And sometimes I'm drawn to their family because I still want that connection. Like, when I used to visit them, they were there with their family. So I have a connection with their family as well. And I don't want to lose that as well on top of that. And sometimes it's hard to know how to process it. I think 3 weeks ago, I went to visit one of my friends, I guess, widows now. And yeah, it's like one of the first things was just her saying how she can't believe he's not there. And it's like, I can't either. And we don't know what to say, but there's nothing else to say really. And you just sort of, at least you hang out because you know each other. And then on occasion, a memory crops back up, and the presence is there. I'm rambling, but I think I'm rambling because this was my way of, so it, similar to what you were describing, it took me many years. Like it took me, I think, almost 10 years to personally start grieving my mother, if you will. And, those years of silence or not saying anything or just not even having the thoughts myself, I think they really affected me in some ways. And now I'm 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 more than happy to, to chat and mention her, and I want to, but I didn't know how. And so now when I lose someone, it hurts, and I I don't like carrying that just in silence or by myself. So I like to express it now, and if I can, with the friends who aren't perhaps here anymore, I do try my best to uh, keep in touch with the family and relatives who know of them at the very least, obviously know them, so I can air it out. I'm not looking. I don't know what I'm looking for. I'm not necessarily looking for healing. I'm just looking for the feeling of someone else who loved this person who I love, speaking about them. And I guess I'm trying to
Yes.
say that to say someone listening maybe might want to try the same thing, if that might work for you. Or sorry.
So you need to actually work on we in grief recovery. I remember I said we grieve every loss 100%.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, you still have to grieve your mother 100%. That friend of yours, though you are connecting with the family, you still have to grieve them 100%. So that is where grief recovery will become different from other people who do counseling, because it's an educational program. So we take you through the steps you need to do one step at a time, so that you first of all see why what you've been doing has not been effective. And then now we teach you what to do effectively, so that you now process it and complete it and say goodbye. And then that is like, now you'll have done that for your mother, then it means you do for your friend and you'll do for any other subsequent losses. Because we say there are no half grievers. You can't grieve halfway and or say I'll grieve all of them together.
There's no shortcuts.
No shortcuts.
each person or each loss 100%.
Yeah, each
Yeah.
person 100%. And there are ways to do it as well. We say you could buy the book and do it for yourself. You
Mm.
can go and meet somebody who is a grief recovery specialist to take you through it as a specialist, or you can be part of a group. So the choices are there. When I always tell people, if you're hard on cash, you can at least manage to buy the book. The issue where the growth and the change comes in is you following the program, reading and doing your homeworks. That is where that evolving takes place. And so even if you just take the book and read it like any normal book, you don't get much from the program. So it is something that personally I would tell people it has helped me. I have seen it transform other people. One of my clients has already gone on and become a grief recovery practitioner as well, because she saw how it helped her. So it is something that is worthy thinking about and worthy telling people about. Just before, in case you get out of time, there's one thing I would like to mention, especially with the men.
Yes.
Men, you have the history of not being able to open up because of the way you've been brought up. Men don't grieve. Men have to be strong for their families. And that has actually kept many men captives because they can't express themselves, even amongst themselves. So having a program like yours is very effective, so that the men can express themselves and say what they're going through, and probably look for one day where you just put them together and have one subject to discuss, maybe how they were brought up. Because looking at men now, I'm particular now here, looking at men, I was brought up in Kenya. Now, somebody who was born and brought up in Africa and came here, there's that culture shock which they are contending with. There's that change in what the traditional way we were brought up. Like men provide, the wives, we stay at home, we take care of the children. You come here, you find, no, the wife has to go, the man has to go. One time you are left with the children, You have to take care of them. You have to cook for them. So people are having conflicting feelings in their heads. They're thinking of their lost independence. They're thinking of the lost connection with the values they were brought up with, and then the cultural values. And some are also threatened by the fact that their wives are becoming more independent or more knowledgeable, which should be something they need to embrace, that they need to be more empowered. So we have that these things, then you put on the pressures at work or at school. So it just compounds what people are going through. And I was talking to one of the mental health crisis person, and I wanted to know her experience with the Black men. And she said it's really sad that her experience with them hasn't been good, in the sense that they don't come for help. Either they come to their team in crisis, which means the police has brought them, or they've come with because they've tried to commit suicide, or they've written as a note or something like that. But all along, they've not told their wife anything or their friends. So nobody even knows where is this problem. So I was just telling her, I'm going to talk to one of the programs, and her message was, tell these men they matter. Their personal health is important. Your mental health is as important as your physical health. So there's help out there. Let's get rid of this stigma and embrace the fact that we need to be not just only men, even women, because our African community, people always say that is not our portion. Whose portion is it? Illness is nobody's portion.
Exactly. That's not my
So
portion.
because of that attitude we have, we lock away the people who need help. We don't take a step, because sometimes it may not be you who will know you need help. It will be somebody, your friend, who will say, hey, Shamanda, you don't look well. I think you need help. So we are there to look into, extend the fact that we need to embrace. In fact, we have these services available freely. Surely we should be able to access them. Because if you are well as a man, your family is well, your community is well, because of the impact you have on your community. So I passed the message I had from her.
I received that and I appreciate that. And that honestly, it does tie to what we are trying to achieve in the long run, because although we say, we're focused on men and trying to normalize the conversation around mental health, promote positive perceptions as well, because it isn't just that, we're not cookie cutter people. So some men are working really hard to be a different kind of dad right now, to have these different relationships with their children, and they still face some of the pressures and the conflicting thoughts that you're mentioning, and to have a community around you that says it's okay, it's normal, and you're doing the right thing. You shouldn't feel bad about it, or you shouldn't feel like you have to force yourself to be this kind of way, because we know that community is, they have their own community as well. Most people, with your family, with other friends, it's not just us. When they come to our events, we want them to go out and lead the change within their own communities, to do the same, because you can't come have this, if you had something on your shoulders, take it off, share it, and just go away light and have solutions. You can't then go back into your situation or environment and see other people going through that and not wish to do the same for them or give them that feeling. You can't express yourself and how much you're going through, air it out with, usually strangers, but in a guided way, and then go home and bottle it up. It would be counterproductive. And we don't force anyone to do anything, but chances are, if you came back and you were saying you were still having these issues, because we care about you once you join the community, we would be asking you, what's stopping you from doing so? Why is this a hurdle? And seeing if there are ways to get around it. Not that we're just the experts. We can refer you to other resources. That's that's just one of the beauties. Like having you on today allows us to share with people the help that's out there, because a lot of us don't think about grief. Often we're thinking about what we have to get, what we have to do. You know, we have to perform for the most part, men and women alike. And society doesn't often allow us to take time for ourselves. So this is, I'm learning a lot. I'm absolutely learning so much. I mean, I can't believe it. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people listening now will appreciate just how much they haven't perhaps thought about grief or thought about addressing it, or how much it might be affecting their family. Some of my friends who've grown their family, had children, are now speaking with me about how they're experiencing the change. You know, I say the loss of independence in one hand, the gain of love and responsibility of a different level on the other. So yeah, I'm I'm a novice at all this sort of stuff, so I'm just there learning my own way as I go as well. I trust the experts in the room who have much more experience than me and have helped many more people like yourself, Dorothy. So again, I can't thank you enough for sharing that. I will ask if there's more that you want to share or anything more specific before I move on to our closing questions.
Yes, I would say one of the things we deal with in grief recovery is looking for what we call short energy releasing behaviors, relieving behaviors, stabs in short. These are the behaviors when we are hurt emotionally. We try to avoid feeling the pain by using those behaviors: eating chocolate, taking alcohol, smoking, promiscuity. People have not been like that, but they just start. Fantasy, games. Now we just switch to the TV. And surprisingly, even good work, Shemanda, even the charity work we do, when we use it as a overworking, as a means that I don't want to be idle, I don't want to think about what I'm going through, then that is a distraction. Or the things you're thinking, if I have enough time, if I finish this, by the time I'm here, I'm going to feel the pain. So you get somebody is constantly on the
go, on the move.
yes, because they're avoiding something. So those, we call them in terms, simple terms, distractions. So it's good for each one of us to think, what have you been using as a distraction in your moments of pain? Is it your anger on your family? Is it your going into your lonely modes and no, everybody else is shut out? Is it physically going in the graveyard and spending hours there or an end? Is it going to the gym? It could be anything. Whatever it is that you use to substitute so that you don't feel that pain. It makes you feel different, but not better. And that's why you'll have to keep doing more of it. Maybe you went and tested alcohol once, then you become and you graduate and graduate, because then the effect has to be there. If you look in your life and you see such things, those are warning signs. So just think for yourself, why did you start that habit? And review, because it's like when you tell somebody, stop drinking alcohol, stop doing this, you've not dealt with the primary thing, why they're doing it. And most of the time in my nursing profession, I always ask people, why did you start drinking? But for doing this or the other, they always attributed it to some form of trauma somewhere. But what do we do as the society? We criticize them. Look at this, they do this. And then the other bit that people really don't know, when you have been an addict and you're a recovering addict, you also go through grief. You are grieving because you've lost your normal pattern of behavior, going to look for those drugs and all this. You have lost your friends, your companions, because those are the people you dealt with in that side. So now you've left that side, you're coming this way. And Shamanda is saying, look at Dorothy, that addict. I don't want to deal with her. So how am I supposed to survive in this society? So we need to look out also when you hear people have been ex-addicts, they need support, they are grieving because they have to rebuild their life in spite of their past. And that's the last final thought. I thought I shouldn't leave without telling you, Shamanda.
I'm very, very thankful that you shared that thought. And I have no doubts it's landed on the right ears, at least mine. So
Yeah.
I was also prompted with this call to action as well with the book, as well as, you can go for the course and everything. Could you just remind the listeners of what this book is that they could get and work for on their own?
Yeah. Grief recovery.
There we go. The Grief Recovery Handbook. If you're on YouTube, you can see it. If not, get over to YouTube. And I think, yeah, one of the biggest takeaways for me there is I do have a lot of stillness and silence, but to purposefully dedicate time to look through some of the things that I believe I may be grieving. I think that's going to be very, very, very helpful for me personally. I hope someone else who's listening can feel the same way, which is why I'm even asking for the book. But because I think, yeah, it's a very small adjustment to make, but potentially the benefits are exponential, right? Unimaginable. Yeah. Don't procrastinate on this. Take some action. And no one needs to know, but you can also undertake this, like Dorothy said, one-to-one or in a group setting. Only you know what you need. So yeah, I hope you do something to make yourself better and help all those around you. Gosh, this is empowering stuff. Okay, I'll move to our closing questions. Like I say, they're quick fire, so I just ask them and you just share the first thing that comes to mind. And we'll see how that goes. We keep them the same for everyone, although I may ask, there's normally 4, but I may ask 5 based on a previous interview we've just done now. The first question: what's the best thing about being Black?
The best thing about being Black? Well, it's just who I am. That's me.
That's a lot of things, all right? Exactly. And I think that's also, it's a very innocuous answer, but it's a very great answer, because the best thing is just being you right
Yes.
there, just as you are, like, because you encompass so many things. Everyone should feel like that as well, perhaps. Yeah, I like it. I like it. All right. The second question: who taught you how to shave?
My mother.
And our third question: what resource do you hope people still use or use 100 years from now?
Audio.
Audio. Like anything in particular? Is there a particular audio resource that you use?
No, I'm thinking audio in the sense that the video, the other things will keep evolving, but the audio remains the same. Audible part of it just remains. We need the audio.
Okay, I follow. That's good. I hope so too. I want to be a heart with 2 ears. All right. I love that imagery. Okay. Final penultimate question, not final. What do you wish more men talked about?
Relationships.
Any particular elements of relationships?
Everything. I'm passionate about the family relationship, the interpersonal relationship. Men are very poor at it.
Okay. And now the final question. What do you wish more women talked about?
More women. I think I would say I would wish more women talked more about self-help than others. You know, like gossiping about somebody else. Talk about improving others or building others.
Or the help you've done or the things you've done for yourself that others can learn from.
You can also
right?
help them.
Yeah.
And maybe I would say they would do more with confidentiality as well, because I think that is part of what breaks relationships.
Yes.
Because of somebody entrusting somebody with their information and then they betray them with lack of confidentiality.
Whew. Gold answers. Wow. That's honestly been amazing, Dorothy. It's been therapeutic for me. I know that much. But wow, that's just been incredible. I can't thank you enough for sharing your expertise, for sharing your experiences, and for giving so much, I think, helpful and beneficial advice, which I no doubt believe it's going to help a lot of people. Wow. Just to be graced by you today, it's been incredible. You always leave me with a lot to think about, and I think you always leave me feeling like I can become better. And I'm certain that's what anyone listening will feel like. If the people listening would like to follow you or your work, what's the best way for them to connect with you, support what you're doing, and I don't know, keep.
I've got some videos on YouTube. Grief support, grief support. They can follow up to just see how grief affects families, grieving children, grieving frontline workers. So if they go on grief support on YouTube, and then I'm not. The other social medias I've left for people like you.
Thank goodness.
And my phone number is 7079 88650481.
Extremely kind of you to share that. Extremely kind of you. And remember as well, Dorothy's book is Marriage, Why Bother by Dorothy.
And there are songs on YouTube as well.
Ooh.
If
The
they
songs?
just put in Dorothy Malanda, I've got plenty of songs there for them.
Excellent. Get serenaded, get supported. Oh, get listening. I see why the Audible is important, huh? Oh, well, I'd say honestly, thank you so much. I genuinely, I really hope that in the future, and I'll do my best to see how we can figure this out, that we get you or we get some sort of grief grief support or recovery workshop or webinar or something incorporated, because I think it's a great resource that is probably very underutilized in our community and in general. So yeah, this has been just perfect.
Well, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to reach the maximum people in the shortest time with that message, that grief, we address it by grieving and by taking active steps towards our healing. Norman Cousins, he says, the greatest loss of life is not death, but what dies inside of us while we are still living. So let's check in ourselves. What has died inside of us? That's my final thought for you.
Well, I can't follow that. So all I'll say is remember, it is good and it is important that you are here. And until the next time you tune in, take care.
Thank you very much and goodbye to everyone.
Hope you enjoyed listening as much as we enjoyed creating.
Don't forget to follow, like, share, and connect with us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Subscribe to our latest episode and listen to any you missed. And tune in next episode.
Take care.